Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts' 2024 annual report. It's bonkers, Harry Litman, in my opinion. I feel like this document is just dripping in a lack of self-awareness. I feel like after all of the awful rulings by the Supreme Court, it's like, do you realize who you are, Justice Roberts? Do you look in the mirror? Do you know who your colleagues are? Do you remember what your rulings have been on absolute immunity, on 14th Amendment, Section 3, revoking the Lemon test for separation of church and state, creating these new tests that allow the mass proliferation of weapons of war in areas where they absolutely shouldn't be? Like, do you realize? I mean, Harry, take a look at what he writes when he goes to the section about the big threats that are facing the court and the judiciary. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts writes, you know what, unfortunately, not all actors engage in informed criticism or anything remotely resembling it. I feel compelled to address 4 areas of illegitimate activity that, in my view, do threaten the independence of judges on which the rule of law depends. 1, violence. 2, intimidation. 3, disinformation. And 4, threats to defy lawfully entered judgments. And you look at those 4 things, Harry, those would seem to be pretty apt descriptors of the behavior of Donald Trump, who Justice Roberts and the right-wing majority on the Supreme Court did give a pass on essentially everything. And then, Harry, when the report starts, talk about, again, dripping in lack of self-awareness, he goes on to tell this story about King George III and how King George III's first act of repression in his X amount of years' reign was asserting that he would be the king over the judiciary and there wouldn't be an independent judicial branch. So in the Declaration of Independence, it was so important to some of the founders of our nation to instill this priority of judicial independence, which found its way into the Constitution, and no one is above the law. Dude, you literally just found for the first time ever that a president is above the law and granted absolute immunity. So, Harry, look, let me give your background. Top federal prosecutor. You were the United States attorney in the Western District of Pennsylvania. You didn't clerk for just one Supreme Court justice. You clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. And for everybody out there, I know you hear different titles and things that get thrown around. Clerking for 1 Supreme Court justice, and I'll brag for you, Harry, is like the most elite of the elite of the elite in law school. Like, it's one of the hardest things. Clerking for 2, frankly, I've never heard of. But this gives you unique perspectives, Harry, into all of this. So the floor is yours. Delusional or descriptive, or how do you call it?
You know, that really is the debate. And thanks, Ben, for your kind words. Is it delusional? Is it bonkers? Or is it just brazen? Because, yeah, you went to the heartland of it, those 4 things. Now, one of them is not like the other. Violence, I think we can all agree that's a bad thing. Friend judges shouldn't have to, no matter what. You know, I mean, I concur with your views of everything they did. Nevertheless, you know, you don't want people going to Brett Kavanaugh's house with guns, etc. But the others, when you read them, turn out to basically be criticizing the court. I mean, there is just a lot in there that is basically saying, in his decorous Chief Justice-y way, that it is what? Unpatriotic or just bad form to be criticizing the court vigorously, but vigorous criticism is exactly what it deserves and has brought on itself. I do want to say, he's getting trashed right and left. That last, well, first, let me just take a step back and say, I do know these are normally the most boring kind of end of year Chief Justice-y, bland, milquetoast things with maybe an appeal for a little more money. These paragraphs really stand out and tell you, once you translate it for the tumultuous times we're in, it reads kind of calm on the page, but if you know the genre, man, he is screaming we are in a very bad place. And that last paragraph to me of political officials threatening not to comply with rulings, that's something of a Rorschach test. You're going to have people on the right suggesting that it refers to a couple things that the Biden administration did, but that's hogwash. The Biden administration, in a couple cases, did very traditional, within the pale kinds of decisions, strategic decisions in the wake of what the Supreme Court holds. To me, what that screams out, or at least what it should, is the very real prospect that the next president of the United States is going to get a ruling and thumb his nose and say, as they say Andrew Jackson did in the 19th century, well, the Chief Justice has given his ruling, let him try to enforce it. And at that point, I think part of this is Roberts figuring out the bed they've made and we all have to sleep in. And if there's an opinion and Trump says, screw you, that's it. That's what authoritarian society means. The rule of law is over. So I think you're right that it's a little bit of a coy, ingenuous kind of track. It's also pretty damn insufferable given that they're the ones who have brought this on. It's also inappropriate for basically making it seem you cannot criticize the court. That would be bad. But this last bit might be, and as strong as a judge or a chief justice can say, oh man, if political officials, that would be Trump, don't listen to the orders we make, the country is in sad shape, which it would be. And if we were writing that postmortem, one of the first few things we would talk about is the Supreme Court's decision in the immunity case, as you say.
There was that ping pong match between the right-wing justices and the justices appointed by the Democratic presidents during the absolute immunity ruling. And the Democratic appointees were talking about the authoritarian inclinations that somebody like a Trump would engage in if you gave absolute immunity. And they gave examples. And they asked Trump's lawyers just to make sure that Chief Justice Roberts and everybody heard. So you're saying you can order SEAL Team 6 to kill opponents. You can sell nuclear secrets. You can do bribes as long as you claim that these are official acts and core constitutional functions. And to John Sauer's credit or lack of credit, he stood up there and he said, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that if those are core constitutional functions or official acts, then likely. And if Congress doesn't impeach, then we should be good. It's up to Congress to go through the impeachment step first. Then you heard the right-wing Supreme Court justices, though, really lean into the unitary executive, which frankly sounds like the authoritarian executive or the conservative principles, meaning conserving the monarchy and not actually conserving our kind of core constitutional beliefs here, but them talking about the chilling effect on the executive and how there would be all of these issues with the executive's ability, to act if there was the potential for criminal exposure and liability. So I take that kind of ping pong back and forth. And then you see Justice Roberts talk about the threats to the court. He's almost echoing the arguments that were the reason not to adopt an absolute immunity doctrine.
That's right.
In an end of the year report. So I guess to your point, it's like, are you dripping with a lack of self-awareness?
Right.
Or is your arrogance dripping where you're just now saying, ha, 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 and I'm going to gaslight you and act like I didn't do what I just did? Final word.
And there's a third way. They all add up to the same thing, but there's a way you could look at this in the first instance as poignant. They've done these things and now they're naked for being rolled over by the president they effectively, well, they certainly did a lot to reinstall. And now it's like, they look around and there's, where's the rule of law and the principle that the Supreme Court worked over a century to build up of respect, integrity, and political officials never questioning that you have to do what they say. And now this joker whom they've helped is in there. He might do it. And guess what? Now it's totally poignant in a sense, except when you realize that they had so much to do with putting themselves in this situation, you don't exactly feel sympathy. But the bottom line is, and let me just say this one paragraph and this one point, others don't see it. Others are just trashing him right and left. I see this kind of point there. And, if it's right, or even if it isn't, we are now, the bottom line is where we are at this pretty pass where you do have, it's actually conceivable. Wouldn't be with any other president that he'll get a ruling he doesn't like and just completely disregard it. And then where are we as a country? So thank you, Donald Trump. Thank you, Chief Justice Roberts. And, here we are. And that's, to me, the other point that emerges from the report, in addition to all these pretty damn cheeky suggestions that to criticize the court is to somehow, be unpatriotic or go outside the proper role of citizens and scholars, which it just ain't.
I'm going to start my report to talking about the reason that we've got rid of kings and the reason that absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Have I quoted Montesquieu for you? Because it's like, dude, shut up. Okay. You're not quoting Montesquieu. You don't need to quote, the founding principles of our country. You betrayed it. And the reason is, and now the question is, what are you trying to say there? Are you trying to frame yourself in the French philosophical thought underpinnings? It's like, just go away. We know who you are. Stop acting like you're, trying to hide behind this lofty philosophical musings when in practicality you've caused real harm to many, many people, not just in America, but frankly throughout the world. Harry,
just one other quick point is you're also being a shill here for Alito and Thomas, who's the criticism of whom are very well taken. They've just been really ethical scandals, and to somehow suggest that political officials like Sheldon Whitehouse shouldn't be calling that out, taking them to task. That's just beyond the pale. The chief justice's job is not to do that. In fact, he should be keeping his own house in order in a way that I wouldn't want to try to wrangle Alito and Thomas either. But he certainly hasn't done anything, and now to say, you can't criticize them, that's just wrong.
Just so hard as a law professor to look my students in the eyes and be
right.
like, that's kind of the law. Like, these are the people. Like, this is the highest part of our profession. Anyway, Harry Litman, the Talking Feds YouTube channel, the Talking Feds podcast, the Talking Feds Substack. It's where I go to get my legal news. You all should go there as well. Again, one more time, Talking Feds Substack, Talking Feds podcast, Talking Feds YouTube. Harry, thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Real quick, Meta just changed their algorithm to suppress political content. Please follow our Instagram at MeidasTouch right now as we head towards 400,000 followers so you don't miss a beat.